I've always loved old school survival horror games, and it's not just because of nostalgia. There's just something about their formula that's really appealing to me. This game managed to capture that perfectly, on top of presenting it in such a captivating style. SIGNALIS is a 2022 game developed by Rose Engine. It has you playing as Elster, a technician android known as a replica. The game begins with her waking up from a pod after her ship crashes on a snowy planet. She doesn't remember much of what happened, so she sets out to search for the one thing she can recall, her lost partner. Along the way, she finds a government facility and encounters corrupted androids, who act kinda like zombies that are infected by some sort of virus. So yeah, she basically spends the whole game regaining her memories and learning about what happened to the place. The game's prologue was less than 20 minutes long, and it served as a tutorial for basic mechanics, but by the end of it, I was so intrigued by the game. While SIGNALIS is inspired by Silent Hill and Resident Evil, it's also inspired by a bunch of other things like Evangelion, as well as David Lynch and Stanley Kubrick movies. I thought that those inspirations were done really well. Like, the cutscenes alone had such a visually stimulating presentation. It's the biggest reason why I was hooked by the prologue. The ominous yet stylish cinematography goes on throughout the game, with all the numbers, subliminal messages, and flashing imagery. The art direction's great too. The game blends a sci-fi anime aesthetic with 3D low-poly graphics, and it even switches perspectives during certain parts of the story. They were brief moments that played like walking simulators, but I thought it was a nice touch that enhanced the experience. So going into the gameplay, I felt right at home as soon as I gained control of Elster, since SIGNALIS plays just like the survival horror games that came before it. It'll have you exploring dark, claustrophobic areas that have lurking enemies, all while picking up items that'll help you survive and solve puzzles. Elster has no health bar too, so you can keep track of her status by looking at your inventory, or by paying attention to visual cues like, when she's limping and bleeding out. And of course, there's the safe rooms. These rooms are the only places where you can save your game and store items in a chest. Infected androids roam in a lot of places, so this made exploring so much riskier. It doesn't help that there's little ammunition in this game, which is why I chose to run away whenever I could. I only took them down when I felt like I would be backtracking through the same area a lot, just to make the path safer. I also fought them when they were surrounding items. I may have wasted bullets and taken a few more hits than I would have liked, but I just couldn't leave all that stuff behind. But yeah, the combat in this game isn't exactly smooth, since you gotta stand still, aim, and then stomp on enemies to finish them off. It got tricky when I had to act fast and had little room to move because Elster feels way too sluggish to do all that. It didn't bother me for most of my playtime though, because it just felt like a standard survival horror thing, and it made sense lore-wise too, since, Elster isn't a combat unit. The only time I got frustrated by it was during the game's boss fights. The bosses were so much faster than Elster, so aiming at them and waiting for the red box thing to target properly felt like an eternity. Thankfully, the game has very few boss fights, so I thought it was fine. Apart from dealing with infected androids, the game has a few challenging puzzles that you have to solve in order to make progress. There's the usual wall safe type that you gotta decode by reading notes or interacting with radio frequencies, while others have you searching rooms for clues. I really like the inventory ones too. There's just something so fun about inspecting objects and combining different items together. The puzzles overall weren't that difficult, but they do require you to pay attention to details in the game. Like, I got stuck doing a few of them later on, just because I would get distracted by real-life stuff, put my playthrough on hold for like a day or two, only to return to it and think, okay, what was I doing? How do I solve this? But if you like getting that light bulb moment when you finally figure out a solution to puzzles in games, then you'll enjoy what SIGNALIS has to offer. Putting the puzzles aside, there was one thing that was constantly on my mind throughout my experience with SIGNALIS. inventory management. The limited inventory space made each looting session both tense and stressful. I mean, I usually love inventory management in games, so I enjoyed doing all that when I first started playing the game, but later on, it just felt tedious. There are only 6 slots in the inventory, so the rest of your items have to be stored away or left behind until you choose to go back for them. I had to do a lot of backtracking to safe rooms just to manage all that, especially when I needed something to unlock a door or complete a puzzle. Now 6 slots wouldn't be an issue if equipped items like guns weren't counted in the inventory, but they were. So when I chose to equip like both a gun and a flashlight, I'm down to only 4 empty slots for everything else. It was frustrating whenever I found important items like halfway across the map, or even on another floor. I had to backtrack to the safe room just to make room for them. Despite my issues with inventory management and backtracking, what really kept me going was the game's atmosphere and narrative. Most of the lore in the game is presented on not just notes and posters, but in the imagery. I won't go into detail for obvious reasons, but playing the game felt like descending into a void where there's no turning back. The flashing images might be confusing at first, but it has a bunch of hints and foreshadowing. Parts of it start to come together, sort of. Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I completely understood the whole thing. SIGNALIS is the type of game that can have countless interpretations depending on who you talk to. The oppressive, dystopian setting with cosmic horror sprinkled in had me intrigued, but I wasn't expecting that there would be more personal aspects to the story, particularly between Elster's relationship with other characters. It wasn't a clear picture, but the game gave glimpses of it that were quite emotional. Even though the game had no voice acting, the haunting and somber music that complemented those scenes made me feel even more empty. It's been a little more than a week since I finished the game and I still haven't recovered. All I can say is that I absolutely love SIGNALIS. I've talked about my frustrations about the gameplay, but the game itself is just brilliant. It's one of the best games I've played this year, and I'd say it's up there as one of the best indie horror games I've ever played. I can't believe this was made by just 2 people. I'm definitely looking forward to any game that Rose Engine works on in the future. It took me around 9 hours to beat the game. If you want to play it yourself, SIGNALIS is out on almost every platform, including Xbox Game Pass. Let me know what you thought about the video. As always, thank you to my patrons at Patreon for supporting my channel. Oh, and if you think this game's cool and you like manga, I highly recommend reading Blom. It's actually the first thing I thought of when I saw SIGNALIS. I don't know if it's a coincidence, but yeah, it has a similar dystopian setting too. Anyway, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.